Hello, I'm Stephen Brown of FM Adviso, and I thank you for viewing today. The ProFM credential was designed to elevate the knowledge and skills of facility professionals around the world, and the ProFM Institute is pleased to share this third in a series presentation as a resource. Pandemic Recovery, Reopening Our Facilities. FM Adviso is a facility management consulting and training enterprise that supports global clients. We appreciate this opportunity to share information on facility management involvements in the challenging environment we face. A PDF copy of the PowerPoint as well as other resources are available to those who contact ProFM or FM Adviso. Contact information will be displayed on one of the last slides. For some background, I hold a number of FM-related credentials, among them the ProFM and both the certified and master certifications as a business continuity professional. My FM experience has been both diverse and global in support of corporate, academic, and production facilities, and I'm qualified by a number of organizations to provide instruction for knowledge and credentials training. The current environment is uncharted territory for many businesses. In the first webinar, I noted that some sites have developed business continuity plans, but many of the plans had not addressed pandemic planning sufficiently, if at all. In the second webinar, I reviewed recommendations that facility managers could take for both closed sites and those with reduced operations. Since the first webinar, we have followed guidelines of the World Health Organization and Centers for Disease Control, as well as the health ministries, departments, etc., as we transition from general awareness to social distancing, onto lockdowns and even quarantines. As of the 20th of April, the situations are generally improving globally. Fewer new cases are reported. Fewer death rates are reported. We're seeing a flattening of the curve that reflects the spread of COVID-19. As a result, businesses are starting to consider relaxing the restrictions and permitting businesses to reopen. The dramatic economic impacts to businesses cause some of them to crave immediate resumption of business activities and restoration of occupancy. But facility managers need to be a voice of reason, and we must act carefully, deliberately, and with a keen eye on maintaining conditions that protect the health and well-being of the facility occupants. Just as important, we must also keep a watchful eye on the potential reemergence of the coronavirus. Many countries have yet to implement full-scale testing for their populations. A recent study indicated that the number of positive cases could be underreported by 50 to 75% because so many infected persons are asymptomatic. CNN reported that Santa Clara, California may be 84% underreported. So if businesses simply reopen without adequate planning and preparation, it's quite likely that more cases will be realized and the restrictions will return, perhaps even more rigid. This presentation will cover the actions you should cover and consider some of the procedures that will guide the reopening of your facilities. The takeaways of this webinar will include appreciation of facility reopening as a part of the disaster recovery plan. We'll talk about planning for the return, including building consensus in your organization for prudent actions. And we'll talk about minimizing future COVID-19 risks. This slide displays a statement that is paraphrased from both Disaster Recovery Institute and the Business Continuity Institute. It reflects that we must have a facility reopening plan that focuses on the pandemic impacts, or we will face dire consequences. Dr. Orlowski of the Association of American Medical Colleges has indicated that whatever we do now, we must still prepare for the likelihood of recurrence in late fall or early winter of 2020. This reinforces the need to apply stringent controls now, even as we revisit actions that we've taken over the past 60 days. We're now recognizing that many businesses had not prepared for pandemic impacts in their business continuity plans. Even worse is the realization that businesses don't have effective disaster recovery plans with focus on critical areas. This graphic depicts the life of an incident. The horizontal axis represents duration, and the vertical axis represents severity or the impacts. The three bell curves represent the categories of the responses. The blue arrow indicates the activities and the time that you might spend on developing and planning and preparing a business continuity plan before the incident occurs. The incident here is the lightning bolt symbol. The red bell curve represents the emergency response or initial disaster response phase. The amber section represents the crisis management phase that we've been undertaking. The orange section represents activities concurrent with the initial disaster. The green curve representing the activities relating to restoring the business back to usual. Begins with the lime green display for the disaster recovery plan. This disaster recovery plan involves how we restore essential services and processes, including facility management. The green arrow reflects where we are today as we prepare to reopen our facilities. The first step in this process is to develop a plan, to organize the actions that are needed. In the first instance, recognize that the restoring facility occupancy portion of the disaster recovery plan cannot be completed quickly, nor should it be rushed, nor should it be developed in a silo. For this reason, the prudent approach is to carefully plan and organize. This is going to require a consensus approach involving multiple departments in the facilities, including human resources, facilities management, production, operations, and others. Those other corporate units have significant responsibilities to manage, so you must confer with them to define who will take actions and who will take decisions. A RACI chart will be very helpful to document who has responsibility, who will be accountable, who will be consulted, and who will be informed. This is an excellent first step toward building that consensus. Next, we define the broad list of topics and concerns and ensure that health and safety is consistently held as a top priority. Also recognize throughout this process you're going to be competing for resources both inside and outside the organization. This is the time to be agile, innovative, and prompt with your assessments and your decisions. Moving to the facility management aspects, you and your team will need to catalog the physical, operational, and occupant function activities that need to be addressed. Also consider the scale of these activities and whether limited or phased resumption of services is the best decision. Recall the earlier comment on competing for resources. You're likely to be very challenged to locate and secure the contractors, the vendors, the suppliers, even availability of your own FM employees. Careful planning is required now to understand and mitigate the risks. So start now. Remember, since everyone and every business has been affected, there's going to be a huge and sudden demand on those vendors, contractors, for logistics and materials by every other business. Define and agree a reasonable schedule with the principal parties. don't allow an aggressive timeline to compromise health and safety. During the joint exercise with those other departments, make sure to review and consider the impacts of the decisions, especially those from other units. For example, if HR takes a decision that every employee will be provided an N95 mask for the workplace, do you have sufficient stock to meet the need? Will FM be involved with distribution? So we want to identify the resource requirements, financial, physical, and manpower. Where can you acquire the masks? What budget? Where will the stock be stored? Where will they be distributed? Who will manage the process? Again, I refer back to the RACI chart that can help prevent other units from taking decisions that the facility management unit cannot be successful to deliver. One of the most critical aspects of the return relates to communications. Business continuity plans typically contain a section that defines how messages are crafted, who will distribute official corporate information, how information will be distributed, whether email, calls, text, or social media, under whose signature will official information be communicated, and they will take steps to ensure that there is no fake news or misinformation. Considerations for the joint exercise include when and how much to return to occupancy. The best available information indicates that a phased or limited returns are advisable. Additionally, discuss the level of occupancy. This is not the time for a return to status quo. An increased space between occupants is appropriate. The FM unit will need to define the available limits that comply with the agreed standards. And consider the schedules, whether normal, flexible, or continuing work from home for some employees. We'll have some more information on this topic later in the presentation. Again, referring to the prior discussion on communications, the panel needs to agree on what formal and informal messages are acceptable and what messages need to remain quote-unquote corporate as compared to what messages can be distributed from individual departments. There's going to be a lot of information to share, and it will be prudent to avoid overloading inboxes. Too many messages can be just as bad as not enough information. The facility management unit is likely to have important information to share, so make sure to understand the process and how to get the message to the occupants. Now let's return focus to the facility management activities. The initial return is going to create anxiety for some persons, and the facility management unit can ease some concerns by communicating status with an informational email to advise what steps have been taken to prepare the site, how facility management will monitor conditions, any interim procedural changes that the returnees need to be aware of, and if there are limitations, providing awareness so alternative arrangements can be made. Communicate sharing and the support services that will and will not be facilitated, and perhaps share updates on projects that may have been completed during the shutdown. Make sure the message has support from the corporate office and work with the communications manager to craft a professional and positive message. Also prepare and display reminder signage to help persons stay safe and healthy when they return. Maybe prepare a welcome for the returning employees. Consider preparing a goodie bag with relevant personal protective equipment and supplies. You can use banners or e-postings, packaged snacks, flowers. There's a number of ways that can contribute to make a positive atmosphere. The goal is to reduce anxiety and restore a comfort level at the workplace. Continuing on the FM focus with critical operations and maintenance, the environmental controls for the physical facilities must be fully restored and stabilized for the occupancy. This may include detailed servicing of heating, cooling, and air filtration equipment. It's also very important to make a special check of water systems. For domestic cold and hot water systems and the water fixtures, when you have times of low or no use in a building, the water remains in the system longer than usual, and the chlorine, as the disinfectant, levels may be reduced. Bacteria can grow and biofilms can form on internal surfaces. In addition, the water may have risen to nearly room temperature in cold systems and fallen too low in hot systems. If the temperatures have gotten between 67 and 124 degrees Fahrenheit, bacteria can grow. So you need to flush the lines and water treat as appropriate. The fixtures also need to be flushed after the distribution system is flushed so that water with adequate levels of chlorine can flow through each fixture. For drinking fountains, each unit will need to be cleaned according to the manufacturer's instructions before reuse. For water softeners, similar to the domestic water, bacteria and biofilm can grow inside and foul the rosin, and that will reduce the life and the capacity of the rosin and later affect chlorine levels negatively. Without that proper disinfecting protection, the soft water is not appropriate. Check and service as needed. For your cooling towers, low load or no load for an extended period can result in the growth of bacteria, biofilm, and possibly Legionella bacteria. If chillers were off and a cooling tower use was diminished, adequate supply of biocides and chlorine can restore control of water quality. Also ensure to check and to test all of the life safety systems and alarms for proper operation. It's strongly advised to undertake an exceptional cleaning of the facilities. The facility must be cleaned and disinfected and prepared for returning occupants, and remember, the better it looks, the more occupants may be put at ease. Whether the site has been partially occupied or vacant will determine the scope of your required activities. Also, if your site was not properly shut down, indoor air quality issues may exist. Carefully and thoroughly inspect and correct any issues before the occupants return. When we consider other facility support tasks, it's important to remember that first impressions count. To make the best impressions, restore grounds maintenance to the best possible condition. Ensure that the exterior lighting is operational and make sure corporate branding and other signage is in excellent shape. Establish and accommodate controlled mail and parcels and materials handling protocols. Consider a minimum segregated hold period after receiving. You could keep mail in covered plastic totes, and received materials can be shrink-wrapped until they're considered safe. Also, restore regulated or limited catering and vending services and restock to meet the planned occupancy levels. Individually packaged snacks and foods are recommended to prevent touch and other infection conveyance. Restock office supplies and consumables that may have been distributed to work-from-home employees. Previously, I mentioned ideas about welcoming occupants back to the workplace. There's a couple of other points I want to make. We want to provide porters and assistants to help persons move back in, and we also want to help them with cleaning and disinfecting office items that they might return. It's probably a good idea to have the help desk expanded and tradesmen on standby to promptly respond to any requests that may arise. When the occupancy resumes, it's recommended that cleaning procedures become enhanced. The suggestions for this include increasing the cleaning and disinfecting frequency for toilets and all primary touch points like elevator call buttons and commonly used door handles. In particular, fecal particulate in toilet facilities is recognized as a high-risk transfer, so sinks and toilet seats need special attention. Empty rubbish bins more frequently, perhaps 3 to 4 times a day, to remove tissues, gloves, etc., and do this by removing the bin liner, not by dumping contents into a trolley and potentially releasing contaminants. Increase workspace cleaning and implement a clean desk policy to better enable access for a more complete cleaning and disinfecting. Some sites are considering the use of disposable blotters to reduce potential spread on work surfaces. Also, provide hand sanitizer and tissues at each workstation. It's recommended that the facility management unit define and implement policies and procedures that will minimize the potential spread of COVID-19. Among these include the prohibiting of shared use of phones, keyboards, mouse, headsets, etc. Avoid sharing workstations or ensure a robust disinfecting between occupancies. Reduce conference and meeting room occupancy to meet distancing requirements. This can be accomplished by removing seating and then even spreading out collaborative area seating and posting occupancy limits. Employ teleconferencing in lieu of in-person meetings for larger groups. Reduce break and lunchroom occupancy. Stagger the break and meal times to reduce density. And apply the controls for handling mail and parcels. It's very important to implement robust and strict visitor access policies for the facility. You want to prevent walk-up visitors, require schedule appointments, and require an external security check-in that includes required temperature and symptom checks, completing a health checklist or questionnaire, and defining a limited access within the facility and provide meeting spaces near the entrance to keep visitors from getting into the facility too deeply. Provide more touch-free options, for example, soap dispensers, towel dispensers, hand sanitizer, door openers, using proximity or card readers in lieu of touchpads. And provide the personal protective equipment that is needed or desired, ensuring that you've got appropriately rated masks and face shields, the appropriate gloves for mail and parcel handlers. Consider disposable food service gloves at common touch points like copiers and coffee urns. Coordinate disinfecting cleaning for shared tools and equipment, or better yet, don't allow the sharing. Clearly define and impose physical distancing requirements. We've been hearing this for weeks, that 6 feet or 2 meter spacing between occupants is the preferred distance. We want to try to get that for the workspaces as well. Orient spaces so occupants do not face each other. Consider directional limits that can reduce close proximity by designating one-way corridors and one-way stairs where it's possible. You can also mark floors to indicate the 6 foot or 2 meter spacing at typical congregation sites like the coffee urns and copiers. Install screens or barriers between persons at close interaction sites like reception, help desk, and cashiers. If you're dealing with benchtop workstations like a call center, increasing screen heights or adding screens may offer some additional protection. The best material is something that can be easily disinfected and cleaned, so avoid fabrics. Reinforce and remind occupants by liberally posting signs and graphics to communicate and reinforce the policies, the procedures, and the guidelines. The Facility Management Unit and Human Resources should work in tandem to implement options that reduce potential spread by community contact. Determine a phased or staged system of occupant returns. The reduced occupancy facilitates greater spacing between the occupants. For example, consider on-site work with 3 phases, each involving 1/3 of the staff in office while 2/3 continue to work from home. Every few days, cycle the 1/3 that's on site back home and bring another third in. Another idea is to coordinate with the various departments to identify a priority list of staff who return first, then adding others on a defined schedule, but maintaining a reduced occupant density so that we maintain the physical spacing. Consider flexible work options. Continue work from home for those persons who are effectively contributing and who wish to continue for a period. Accommodate flexible options for staff who have schedule challenges like children at home or not in school and transportation issues. And utilize free addressing options that can increase distancing by allowing persons to sit in unassigned areas. Stagger the work times for employees so you prevent close proximity at the entrances and having the same schedules for breaks and meals. Promote flexible schedules that can accommodate the special needs. The Human Resources Department is responsible to identify who might return to work and who should not return to work. They should identify at-risk persons, those with underlying health conditions, who should remain at work from home status. They should characterize what persons could remain on work from home status, and their input is needed to define flexible occupancy schedules and alternate shift times. Human Resources is also responsible to share information on what is required before employees return to work. They should identify persons who have had or recovered from COVID-19, if possible, requiring screening tests for returning occupants, even distributing a confidential health check questionnaire to determine who might be exposed. Also to prepare an access control program to check returning occupants for elevated temperatures or other symptoms. Within the limits of confidentiality, the facility management team may be called on to assist with these programs. Official communication protocols are needed to convey information about the return to the workplace and the interim policies that will govern the operations. The date, the time, the shift, the flexible hours, what is the defined entry and exit protocols, defined enforcement, and ensuring to communicate that willful violations could result in the removal from the site. Human Resources should advise limitations and restrictions relating to the workplace. If a person is symptomatic or tested positive, they may not enter the facility or they are immediately sent home. Requiring personal hygiene, such as hourly hand washing, plus washing hands after touching shared surfaces. Respiratory hygiene protocols, the personal protective equipment that is provided or required and worn on the workplace. And sharing space use limitations that are being implemented by facility management. Also, if not in place, HR should organize an employee assistance program to provide personal support for the challenges that they may face. It's imperative that the facility management and other departments secure the support from the executives or corporate operations level to develop, implement, and enforce the policies. It is likely that the policies are going to be dynamic. They're going to be subject to changes as the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, and other official offices provide guidance or directives. Having a clear and robust support from the executives will reduce the challenges from the departments and individuals, and thus will enable a higher level of protection for the business. Some business executives are preparing a welcome or return message, a video that will be distributed that is positive, motivational, recognizes challenges and shared goals, and advises proper steps being taken. Businesses that have a documented disaster recovery plan, will implement the components and the activities that work to restore business function toward a normal state of affairs. The facility manager needs to be keenly aware of the content of the disaster recovery plan and the activities and the contributions that will be expected of them. The executive director of the World Health Organization Health Emergencies Program was recently asked his thoughts on countries thinking of relaxing COVID-19 controls. His reply is certainly applicable to facility management. He said, he actually warned, you can't replace lockdown with nothing. You must replace lockdown with a very deeply educated, committed, empowered, and engaged community. Knowledge and dedication, plus operating from a position of powerful competence, will help you as the facility manager to help your organization get through the challenges. Engage with your peer departments in your organization and maintain health and safety as the priority. Be vigilant and be safe. While I hate to be repetitive, I cannot close without a reminder that you must document your considerations and your actions and the course corrections that are realized as the facilities open. So in closing, I want to share that the information contained in this presentation is based on the known best practices and recommendations as of 20 April. It is your professional responsibility to remain up to date on changes that will arise. FM Adviso can assist in this regard. Make sure to monitor the guidelines that are communicated by government, ministries, the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, and medical professionals. It's important that you only deal with facts that you can verify. I recommend you take a very conservative approach because we are speaking of critical matters, the health and well-being of ourselves, our families, and our colleagues. As I mentioned early in the presentation, there's a high potential that a second wave of COVID-19 may be realized. If that comes to pass, you will realize significant benefit by following the recommendations to document the actions taken as referenced in this and earlier webinars, so your response times are reduced and you don't waste efforts on actions that don't provide the desired results. Some source information is provided, and I will remind that FM Adviso and ProFM are both available to answer questions and provide support. Our contact information is displayed. So until next time, I offer thanks for your time and to review this presentation. Be safe and be well.